The angry snake twisted tightly around Luna the Labrador. Then Luna did something so unexpected that witnesses could hardly believe their eyes. The sudden chilling sound of a dog's whimper pierced the air of the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a sound that didn't belong in the peaceful Tuesday morning, a cry that spoke of fear and distress. The source of this unsettling noise was hidden behind the tall wooden fence of 42 Maple Street, in a backyard that until moments ago had been as tranquil as any other on the block. Jake, one of the local garbage collectors on his weekly rounds, had just completed emptying the trash can at the curb. He was about to wheel the empty bin back to its usual spot when the dog's whine caught his attention. Something in the way it sounded sent the hairs on the back of his neck standing. It wasn't the ordinary bark of an excited pet, or even the howl of a lonely CA9. This sound was different, urgent, almost pleading. Curiosity and concern fought in Jake's mind for a few fleeting moments before his mind was made up. He looked briefly at his watch, knowing he was running late, yet the nagging feeling that something was amiss would not let him leave. A quick look around to ensure no one was looking in his direction, and he unlatched the gate, stepping into the backyard. What met his gaze had to be from some nature documentary gone terribly awry. Lying frozen in the middle was a giant black Labrador, its body stiff with tension. Wrapping around the torso of the dog was an enormous snake, its scales glinting in the morning sun as it tightened its grip. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the snake, which he would later find out was an escaped python from an exotic pet owner living nearby, was easily 6 feet long, its muscular body twisted around the Labrador's midsection. Wide with fear were the dog's eyes, its tail tucked between its legs as it let out another pitiful whine. "Holy shit," Jake exclaimed, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood dead in his place, trying to make sense of the unreal scene before him. The snake's head was poised near the dog's neck, its forked tongue darting in and out, as if tasting the air. For the Labrador, she was in a kind of shock, neither fighting nor fleeing, just quivering under the snake's strong coils. Meanwhile, Jake's eyes scanned the yard for anything he could use to help. That was when he saw what caused his heart to fall further still. Not too far away were 3 black Labrador puppies clumped together and whimpering softly, seemingly aware of their mother's distress, but yet too young to comprehend the danger. The stakes had just gotten a whole lot higher. It wasn't just any dog that was in peril, but a mother with young puppies depending on her. Jake's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Should he try to intervene, call for help? He had no experience with snakes, let alone one this size. The wrong move could spell disaster for the dog, or even put him in danger. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. For a moment, he considered calling out to the dog's owner, Mrs. Allison, but he quickly dismissed the idea, remembering the frail, elderly woman had seen shuffling to her mailbox just last week. She was probably too old to do anything about this situation, and seeing her dear pet in such danger would break her heart. So why cause her unnecessary sorrow when she could not do anything to help? He just stood there frozen, the Labrador dog's eyes locked with his. Although fear was marked on the trembling body of the dog, in those brown eyes was fierce determination. That look snapped Jake out of the chokehold that held him paralyzed. He knew he had to act, and fast. One more glance into the unreal scene, and Jake pulled out his phone. His fingers were shaking as he dialed 911, the answer to any emergency situation. A calm, composed voice answered. "What's your situation?" Jake took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the intertwined animals before him. "You're not going to believe this, but I need help with a snake, a big one, and a dog, and puppies. It's hard to explain. Please send someone to 42 Maple Street quickly. We're going to need animal control, and probably a vet." As he hung up the phone, Jake steeled himself for what was to come. Even though he couldn't assist the dog alone, he involuntarily saved Mrs. Allison from seeing her beloved in such a blood-curdling situation. Her life had been turned upside down with the arrival of Luna, her faithful black Labrador. The widow in her late 70s found fresh meaning and joy in the companionship of her trusty K9 companion. Mrs. Allison received Luna shortly after her husband's death. A puppy black Labrador given by Mrs. Allison's children, who were concerned that their mother lived alone. Since the start, Luna had proved more than just a pet. She became Mrs. Allison's constant companion, confidant, and source of joy. On any given day, one could find Mrs. Allison at the local park, sitting on a bench with Luna loyally by her side. She would tell anyone who'd listen how Luna had given her a new lease on life, providing a reason to get up in the morning and venture outside. It wasn't just Mrs. Allison that benefited from Luna's presence. The whole neighborhood had grown rather fond of the pair. Kids were always stopping to pet Luna on their way to school, and other dog owners would stop to chat with Mrs. Allison during their walks. Luna had become a staple in the community, her wagging tail and friendly demeanor a welcome sight to all. The birth of Luna's puppies, just a few weeks ago, was cause for celebration on Maple Street. Mrs. Allison was on cloud nine. She had shown off proudly the 3 black bundles of fur to anyone who stopped by, her beaming face speaking more than words ever could say. The puppies had brought excitement and a new sense of purpose into Mrs. Allison's life, and gave her even more reasons to smile and share that joy with others. Little did Mrs. Allison know that at this very the peace in the morning she came to expect had taken an about turn one that was turning her beloved Luna's facing into an unexpected and dangerous situation in their very backyard. As Jake forced himself to focus on the immediate problem at hand, his mind kept reverting to his garbage truck. He was supposed to be with Michael for their shift. Michael, however, had called him and told him that he was going for an early morning checkup at the hospital. Couldn't get back in time before their shift began, so they had agreed to meet later that morning to continue with the work. He turned his attention back to Luna and the snake wrapped around her. He began to study the snake more closely, trying to determine what kind it might be and how it was behaving. The snake's body was thick and muscular, and its scales were a brown and tan pattern that would have provided excellent camouflage in a more natural setting. As he watched, Jake noticed something strange about the snake's behavior. While it was certainly wrapped tightly around Luna, it didn't seem to be constricting further. Instead, it appeared to be holding on. The snake's head was moving slowly, its tongue flicking in and out as if it were trying to make sense of the situation it found itself in. Luna, for her part, remained surprisingly calm. Her initial whimperings had subsided, and while she was still clearly tense, she wasn't panicking or trying to fight off the snake. It was almost as if some deep, instinctual part of her understood that sudden movements might provoke the predator wrapped around her. Jake's mind raced as he tried to figure out how to separate the two animals. He knew he had to act quickly, but every option seemed fraught with danger. If he tried to pull the snake off, it might tighten its grip, or strike out at him using a stick or other object to pry it loose could injure Luna or anger the snake, and simply waiting for animal control to arrive might take too long. Who knew how long Luna could endure this stress? Yes, cautiously Jake took a step closer, speaking in a low, soothing voice. Easy there, Luna, good girl, stay calm. He wasn't sure if his words were more for the dog's benefit or his own. He inched closer. Jake noticed a garden hose that was coiled near the back porch. An idea began to take shape in his mind. Perhaps if he could spray water on the snake, it would become disoriented enough to loosen its grasp. It was a shot in the dark, but it seemed less hazardous than trying to physically intervene. Slowly and carefully, Jake worked his way over to the hose. He never took his eyes off the entwined animals, ready to jump back at the slightest indication of movement from the snake. Jake's hand closed around the hose, and he began to inch back towards Luna and the snake. He turned the nozzle slightly, allowing a small trickle of water to flow, testing the pressure. The sound of running water seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the backyard. Just as Jake was about to aim the hose at the snake, he heard the sound of approaching sirens in the distance. The wail of approaching sirens pierced the tense silence of the backyard. Jake's grip on the hose tightened. His eyes darted between Luna and the sound of, but as the sirens drew closer, it became the precise moment when everything began to go terribly wrong, because the sudden unfamiliar noise put the snake into a constrictive action, wrapping its coils around Luna's body. Labradors are known for their stoic calmness, but with her eyes welling up with tears of pain, her low whimper was hardly heard above the encroaching sirens, but it was heart-wrenching to Jake. She tensed, her muscles quivering under the snake's tightening grip. Jake could see the fear and discomfort etched in every line of the face set in the dog's face, her earlier resolve rapidly dissolving. Her breathing became labored, each inhale a struggle against the snake's constricting body. Two uniformed officers quickly made their way into the backyard, their movements swift but cautious. "Sir, please step back slowly," One of the officers instructed Jake, her voice firm but reassuring. "We need you to move away from the area to give us room to work." Jake nodded carefully, backing away. He watched as the officers conferred quietly, their expressions grave as they discussed their approach. The lead-off officer, a woman with short gray hair, turned to Jake. "Sir, can you tell us how long the snake has been wrapped around the dog?" Jake swallowed hard. "I found him like this maybe 20 minutes ago, but I don't know how long it had been going on before that." The second officer, a younger man named Tim, was carefully approaching Luna, and the snake a long pole with a loop at the end in his hands. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "We're here to help, girl. Just stay calm for us." The snake, aware of the new presence, tightened its coils. Once more Luna let out a yelp of pain, her body trembling with the effort of remaining still. "We need to act fast," the lead officer said. "That snake's putting too much pressure on her rib cage. We don't have time for sedation." Tim nodded, his face set in determination. "I'll try to get the loop around the snake's head. If I can secure it, maybe we can unwind it without causing more harm to the dog." As Tim inched closer, the snake's head rose, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. With a swift movement, he managed to slip the loop over the snake's head. "Got it?" he exclaimed. Gradually, he began to set Luna free from the snake's grip. "That's it, girl," the lead encouraged softly, kneeling beside Luna's head. "Just hold on a little longer. You're doing great." With each oil that was unwound, Luna's breathing got a little easier, her body relaxing incrementally. Finally, with one last careful maneuver, the snake was completely separated from Luna. Tim quickly secured its head in his grip, preparing to place it in a specially designed container. But the snake's body suddenly started to writhe and shake, and slowly it became hard for Tim to retain control. What happened next was very hard to believe. Luna, who had seemed barely conscious moments before, suddenly sprang to her feet, with a burst of adrenaline. Her eyes, which had never left the snake, blazed with a mix of fear and determination. Before anyone could react, she lunged forward, her jaws clamping down hard on the snake's tail. With a vicious shake of her head, Luna attempted to rip the snake in two, her powerful jaws working furiously. The snake thrashed wildly, caught between Tim's grip and Luna's teeth. For a moment, it almost seemed as if Luna might succeed in her desperate attack. But just as quickly as it had begun, Luna's strength gave out, and she released her grip on the snake, falling back to the ground, her body shaking with exhaustion. The sudden spurt of energy had used up what little reserve she still had. Tim, recovering from his shock, had been quick to take advantage of the snake's brief disorientation and get it fully inside the container. His partner, she turned at once to the now still Labrador. Jake leapt to Luna's side, dropping to his knees beside her. "Oh, Luna," he managed to utter, stroking her head with a gentle hand. His voice was filled with amazement and worry. The lead officer stood up, her face a picture of both relief and risen concern. "We need to get her to a vet immediately," she said firmly. "That last burst of activity might have worsened any internal injuries. We need to make sure there's no serious damage from either the constriction or her sudden movement." Jake nodded suddenly. "Remembering the puppies, what about her puppies?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. The officer glanced at the pen where the puppies were whimpering. "The puppies seem unharmed and are too young to be separated from their environment unnecessarily. It's best if they stay here. Can you ensure someone will look after them until we can return?" Luna. Jake nodded firmly. "Of course, he'll take care of it right away," as the officers carefully loaded Luna into the animal control van. Jake couldn't help but marvel at the dogs, but visibly shaken by what she had just experienced, and on the verge of tears. It required strength and bravery in herself. Luna never took her eyes away from her puppies. There was such longing in her eyes as the van's doors swung shut. With the immediate crisis over, Jake knew he had to tell Mrs. Allison what had happened. He approached the front door with his heart heavy from having to deliver bad news. Taking a deep breath and ringing the doorbell, after a moment, Mrs. Allison opened the door, her hair slightly disheveled and eyes still heavy with sleep. Blinking a few times, clearly having been roused from a nap, Jake recounted the harrowing events, watched as Mrs. Allison's face paled with each word. When he had finished, she leaned against the door frame, looking visibly shaken. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "Poor Luna. I can't believe this happened. Thank you for being there, Jake. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been around." Jake assured her. The animal control officer said Luna seemed stable, but they needed to take her to the vet just to be sure. "They left the puppies here, though. They'll need care until Luna returns, Mrs. Allison nodded, gathering herself. Of course, he'll look after them. It's the least I can do after all you've done. As they walked to the backyard to check on the puppies, Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fished it out, seeing Michael's name on the screen. Jake, where are you, man? Michael's voice came through, a mix of concern and impatience. Him at the nearest junction, waiting for you. Everything okay? Jake glanced at Mrs. Allison, who was now kneeling by the puppy pen, gently soothing the whimpering pups. He felt torn between his responsibility to his job and his desire to ensure everything was settled here. Yeah, okay, Jake replied. There was an emergency with a neighbor's dog, but it's under control now. I'll be there in a few minutes. After hanging up, Jake turned to Mrs. Allison. I have to go now. My work partner is waiting. Will you be all right with the puppies? Mrs. Allison looked up from the pen, a weak smile on her face. Well managed, Jake. Thank you again for everything. Please go on. I'll call you if there's any news about Luna. With a final N, Jake hastened his pace out of the yard as he ran towards the junction where Michael was waiting. His mind was racing, a muddle of emotions and thoughts. The picture of Luna, brave and protective, even in her distress, was still fresh in his mind. He prayed that she would soon recover and be returned to her puppies soon. Nature is just full of surprises at times. When we think we can anticipate their actions, animals do something quite different that leaves us zapping with surprise at their latent inner strengths and instincts. Have you ever seen an animal do something completely out of the blue in a crisis? Hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories, and we'll catch you in the next one.